Hello BookTube, hello book friends. Welcome back to my channel and another video. Today, as you can tell from the title, I want to talk about my top 10 of 2024. I had the email from Goodreads yesterday that said how many books I'd read in the year and how many pages and all of that jazz. And I thought, well, I was kind of flicking through looking at all the books that I read, and it's a little bit out of date, but I don't think I'm going to read that many more books this year, given that we're now the kind of 18th of December, I think. So I thought what I'd do is just have a look back and pick 10 that my favourites. They're not necessarily the best books in the world, but they're the books that I've enjoyed the most this year. Now, I've also caveated that with a clause that a particular author can only feature once, because there are a couple of authors that are on the list that could have had like 2 or 3 books within the top 10, and then there would have been like two authors with like 6 books between them, and then a couple of others. So I've caveated it a bit. I will talk about those authors and some of the other books, but I've just picked a book for that particular author, and that's kind of based on memory and what I remember the most. So let's get started. This isn't in a particular ranks order. This is just in the order that I was looking through the pictures and I've picked them out. So it's probably kind of chronological from January to now, but not in a particular that like number 1 is my best and number 10 is my worst. So they're all, in my view, probably equal of being first or last, if that makes sense. So let's pick the first one, and this was one that I read early in January, and that was Stephen King's Holly. Holly Gibney, the main character, is a recurring character in a lot of Stephen King books of the last, 10 years, maybe a bit longer. And I quite like the character as well. This one is quite dark. It's an investigation into a kind of serial killings over a period of time, and it's not really a horror. It's a crime novel with horrific elements, if that makes sense. But yeah, I really enjoyed Holly. So that was the first book on my list. And then second book on my list, and this is kind of stuck in my head most of the year. And again, this was a January read. And that was Local by Alastair Humphreys. Now, there is a premise that sits behind this book that back when we were all locked down during COVID and we could only go out once a day, Alastair set up a project to go out into his local area and explore each grid square on the local map at random. So he picked a random square one day a week, and so when he was allowed out on his for his exercise during lockdown, he went out and explored a grid square, and this is kind of the story of what he found and what he noticed. And it's I really enjoy it. I'm probably not doing it justice, but I really enjoyed this book, and it prompted me to kind of do something similar. And I got a map drawn up centered on our house, and started doing the same, and then we moved house, so I did the same thing again and got a second map drawn up. And there's something to be said for exploring your local area. If you don't know it very well, there's something to be said for doing that. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that as I think it might be the only non-fiction pick. It is the only non-fiction pick on my list. All the rest are fiction. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and that was again January. It stuck with me the entire year, and I think I probably will reread it soon because I enjoyed it that much. So third book on the list, I haven't got a although I read it in paperback, can't find the paperback, so it's joined all the other missing paperbacks that are out there at the minute. And that's Robert Harris's Enigma, which is based on the work done at Bletchley Park during the Second World War and the cracking of the German Enigma codes. And then there's this sort of fictionalized story within that. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was a really good read. And then this is an author who could have been on here multiple times, and that's Craig Thomas. And I need to do a separate video on his books, but the book I've picked on is The Bear's Tears, but I could have picked The Hooded Crow, I could have picked Jade Tiger, I could have picked All the Grey Cats, I could have picked The Last Raven. I've read a lot of his books this year. The bulk of the ones I've read this year have been in the Aubrey and Hyde series, and I'm coming to the end of that series now. I finished, I think it was either book 7 or book 8, Playing with Cobras, earlier this week, and I'll talk about that in my weekly wrap-up video. But yeah, this has been I've really enjoyed reading this author. Some of his earlier books I've read before, but a lot of the later ones in the series I haven't read before. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that. But as I say, he could have been on here like 5 or 6 times without trying. Then another book that was this was a bit of an odd one. I'd not read any books by this author before, but I've now got a couple of his other books to read. And this is Richard Powers. And the book is called, I don't know if it's pronounced Bewilderment or Bewilderment, because it could be either. This is very much, it's a book set with a dad who's lost his wife, so he's now a single parent to his, and I think probably autistic, somewhere on the autism spectrum. His son sits, and his son is having all sorts of problems at school, with the loss of his mum, and a lot of the way they get over that is they get out into the wild. His son really gets into trying to save the planet, and it's just it really struck me. I'm not a great one for kind of slushy, that type of story, but it really got to me. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's kind of how the two of them navigate the world in their kind of new circumstances, put it that way. And if I say too much more, I think I'll spoil the book if you want to read it. And it's not been out all that long, so it's not sort of something that I think is probably there for a lot of people, so I won't say much more. But I really enjoyed that, and it was a bit of an unexpected. It was a kind of 99p impulse Kindle purchase, and I don't regret it. And then another author that could be on here multiple times, and I've read multiple books, is Georges Simenon's and again a Maigret series. So this is Maigret and the Headless Corpse. Basically, story is a headless corpse turns up in one of the Paris canals, and this is the story, how Maigret finds out who the body was, and how he died, and so on. And when you consider these books are like 178 pages, this particular one, so to tell that kind of story in really quite tight prose, and still make it interesting is a real art. And this is my kind of ongoing project to read kind of all of the Maigret novels, and I've read a few this year, and I've got a stack on my shelf to read. So yeah, but this is, again, he could have been on here, like Craig Thomas, he could have been on here multiple times. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed a good Maigret novel. Then, and again, another one who could have been on here multiple times, Dick Francis, Proof. I mentioned this in a previous video, but read 2 or 3 of his, and most of these are rereads, to be fair. In fact, all the ones this year I think have been rereads. But these still stand up today, and I still enjoy them. So, that's a good Dick Francis novel can't be beaten in my view. But again, between the Simenon, Thomas, and Francis, that's that's easily 10 books. And then again, this is a theme. Martin Walker's Bruno the Detective series. I've picked Dark Vineyard just because it was one that I read early in the year, but there were several others that I could have picked, and I'm working my way through his books as well, so there'll probably be more of his in the not too distant future. But yeah, again, it would be really easy to make a list of 10 books solely based on a handful of authors, and I think it's good when you find an author that you really enjoy, and it's something you can fall back on if you need a good read that it's not going to let you down. Right, where are we? Bucking the trend from written to graphic novels and cartoons. So this is a 2-volume set, but I'm only going to count it as one book. So this is Dan Dare, The Man from Nowhere, and Rogue Planet. Sorry, I can't quite get those in focus. So these are Dan Dare, for those who don't know, is a character in what was the Eagle comic back in the 50s and 60s predominantly, but it's these are fantastically well drawn. Can you see this? Fantastically well drawn, and this essentially follows the story of a alien spaceship crashing on Earth, and in it are some escapees from a planet that has been taken over by a hostile alien force, and Dan Dare sets off to rescue or try and save the planet at kind of overwhelming odds and so on. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed those. I used to read, the Eagle was a bit before my time, but there were lots of reprints and things, and I've enjoyed reading those. And then finally, and this is probably where might get me into trouble for next year's planned reading, and that was reading The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. And I read this. I've wanted to read this for a while, and I finally thought, right, I'm just going to buy a copy. I've been looking for a copy in second hand, hadn't been able to find one where I've been looking, so I thought I'm just going to buy a copy, buy a new copy, and read it. And it's quite a thick book, not 700 plus pages, quite a lot of rough. So hang on, let's get to so 760 pages in this edition plus notes. And I really enjoyed it, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to read some more Dumas. So I ordered The Count of Monte Cristo, which is even bigger, and I've talked about this. That's one of my books I'm procrastinating on, and this is where it's going to get me into trouble next year, because I really want to read that book soon. And I'd like to read other books, so The Man in the Iron Mask, and other kind of related fiction, and I suspect there's a kind of, I think is it 20 years after or something like that, which is the kind of The Three Musketeers 2 if it was a film. So yeah, there are quite a few Alexandre Dumas books that I would like to read soon. An Account of Monte Cristo is one, and that is, as I say, 1,700 pages, I think, something ridiculous. So yeah, that's a goal for next year, and I'm saying it now to you, to be held to account, and maybe I'll start it soon. Maybe I'll read it over Christmas. It's always a bit dangerous doing something like that, because inevitably someone's going to buy me books for Christmas and I'm going to want to read those, but maybe I could read it maybe I've got enough time to read it between now and Christmas Day. What do you think? I don't know. Anyway, those, on that note, are my top 10. I say not in any particular order, just 10 books I've really enjoyed this year. And, so what are your top 10? What books would you put in your, or top 5, or just your best book of the year? Let me know in the comments below, and I will speak to you next time. If you have been, thanks for watching, and speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.